There are patterns buried deep in the history of empires and markets, hidden beneath the noise of progress. They whisper the same warning, over and over again. It happened in 1929. It happened in 2008. And it's happening again. The names change, the numbers grow, the tools evolve, but human nature remains exactly the same. Greed, leverage, and denial, the trinity of collapse. Every era believes it's different, that it has learned that this time is special. Every era is wrong. The year is 1929. America is a symbol of unstoppable growth, a modern Rome built on machines, steel, and optimism. The newspapers call it the Roaring '20s. Jazz fills the streets, factories hum a production, and Wall Street becomes a temple. People have begun to believe that the market isn't a place. It's a law of nature, one that only moves upward. Every cab driver, every teacher, every shop owner has a stock tip. Everyone is an investor. It feels like wealth has been democratized. In truth, it has only been delayed. At the heart of the boom was an invention that would define the century: credit. For the first time, ordinary people could buy stocks on margin, borrowing 90% of the money to make a bet they could barely afford. It was a financial miracle on paper. Why wait to be rich tomorrow when you could borrow and be rich today? The system rewarded risk and mocked caution. The more you borrowed, the more you earned, until the moment you didn't. Banks, hungry for profit, joined the game. They lent money they didn't have to people who couldn't pay it back. They believed the market would protect them because it always had. The market was immortal. The ticker tape, those endless streams of numbers, felt like destiny. Each click was the sound of the future being printed, until the day it wasn't. In the autumn of 1929, the rhythm changed. A few small tremors, unnoticed by most, signaled what was coming. Factory orders slowed. Credit tightened. Farmers defaulted. But optimism is a drug stronger than fear. The newspapers said everything was fine. Economists promised that the economy was stronger than ever. The government reassured the people that the fundamentals were sound. It was all an illusion. An empire built on borrowed confidence. Then came the moment. October 24th, 1929, Black Thursday. Millions of shares sold in panic. The floor of the New York Stock Exchange turned into chaos. Phones rang unanswered. Traders screamed as numbers fell faster than they could read them. By the time the market closed, billions in wealth had vanished. But that was only the beginning. The following Monday, it collapsed completely. Black Monday. Then Black Tuesday. In 3 days, the dream of infinite growth was gone. People who had been millionaires on Friday were beggars by Wednesday. The illusion of prosperity cracked, revealing the hollow truth underneath. The wealth never existed. It was made of promises, and those promises had all expired at once. Banks failed. Factories closed. Millions lost their jobs. The lines outside soup kitchens grew longer every day. Fathers stood in silence, unable to feed their families. Farmers burned crops they couldn't sell while their children starved. The photographs of that time still echo a century later. Faces of disbelief, confusion, and quiet despair. They had believed in the system, trusted it, worshipped it, and it had betrayed them. The Great Depression was more than an economic collapse. It was a collapse of faith. Faith in progress. Faith in money. Faith in the idea that man could outsmart reality. The stock market had not just crashed. It had revealed the truth of human greed, hidden under the costume of innovation. The American dream had been built on borrowed time. The government tried everything: printing money, creating jobs, building public works. The world watched as the richest nation on earth learned how fragile its wealth really was. The gold standard cracked. The banking system fractured. And the same voices that shouted "by now" began to whisper "never again." But the truth is, they didn't learn. Not really. Because human memory is short and human ambition is infinite. Within a generation, the same cycle would start again. The faces would change, the technology would advance, but the story would remain identical. Belief would become greed. Greed would become leverage. And leverage would become collapse. When we look back at 1929, we like to believe it was a simpler time. That we, with our data, our algorithms, our financial models, could never repeat those mistakes. But that belief is the first mistake, the one that guarantees the rest. What collapsed in 1929 wasn't just the stock market. It was the illusion that wealth could be separated from reality. That paper could replace value. That optimism could replace truth. Every empire, every civilization, every market that forgets that law eventually remembers it the hard way. The lesson is always the same. You cannot borrow your way to prosperity. You cannot print your way to security. You cannot escape consequence forever. Rome tried. Spain tried. Britain tried. America tried. Each thought they were different. Each thought they had mastered the game. Each felt the same way. 1929 wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a pattern. The same pattern that would reappear, disguised and digitized decades later. The names would change, banks, mortgages, derivatives, but the core would remain identical. The next generation would believe it had built something new. In truth, it had rebuilt the same machine, the one that always devours itself. The ticker tape has gone silent now, replaced by screens. The factory whistles by the click of algorithms. But if you listen closely, beneath the hum of the present, you can still hear it, the rhythm of the same old song. It plays every century, in every empire, until the last investor, the last emperor, the last believer finally understands. It was never different. It never will be. They said the Great Depression could never happen again, that we had evolved beyond panic, that technology, data, and policy had made collapse impossible. The century's first great disaster had become a story in history books, a myth from a primitive time. But the same human heart still beat beneath the polished surface of progress. And when you build an empire of paper, time always finds a way to light the match. The early 2000s were an age of easy money. The internet had survived its first crash. Markets were recovering, and optimism was once again the national currency. Banks had discovered a way to turn houses into gold. They called it financial innovation. It was supposed to make markets safer, more efficient, more democratic. Instead, it built a time bomb. A new system of debt began to grow, complex, beautiful, and utterly misunderstood. Mortgages were no longer loans between people and banks. They were raw material, bundled, sliced, and sold across the world. Investors didn't see families buying homes. They saw yield. Every mortgage was a number, every number a product, and every product a promise that could be resold again and again. The alchemy of the modern age was complete. Risk had been turned into profit. Low interest rates fueled the fire. The Federal Reserve kept money cheap. An illusion of stability encouraged borrowing on a scale no civilization had ever witnessed. People bought second homes they couldn't afford, and banks lent with eyes closed. Regulators nodded along. The entire world was high on leverage. When the first warnings appeared, a few missed payments, a few defaults, no one listened. The graph still pointed upward. The economists smiled on television. The rating agencies stamped everything AAA. Like a priest's blessing on a doomed congregation. The bubble was sacred, and questioning it was heresy. By 2006, the machine had become unstoppable. Tens of trillions in synthetic products, derivatives of derivatives, floated through the system. Each layer fed the next, like mirrors reflecting mirrors, until no one could see where reality ended. Wall Street worshipped its own creation. Hedge funds, banks, insurance giants, they all fed from the same source, never realizing it was poison. Then the music changed. Housing prices slowed, then slipped. The magic asset, the foundation of the dream, began to rot. Suddenly, those beautiful securities, those perfect computer model masterpieces, became toxic overnight. No one wanted them. No one even knew what they were worth anymore. Confidence, the invisible glue of modern finance, dissolved in days. In 2007, the first cracks became earthquakes. Bear Stearns collapsed under its own weight. In 2008, Lehman Brothers, a 158-year-old pillar of capitalism, vanished in a single weekend. The global financial system froze. Money itself stopped moving. Credit evaporated. ATMs ran empty. For the second time in a century, the world stood at the edge of a financial abyss. People watched as markets fell 700 points in an hour. Banks pleaded for salvation from the same governments they once mocked. Panic returned, but this time it was digital. There were no ticker tapes, only glowing screens counting down the end. Trillions of dollars disappeared like breath on glass. It wasn't just numbers. It was pensions, savings, homes, and faith. Then came the rescue. Bailouts, stimulus, quantitative easing. Words invented to hide the same act. Printing money to stop the bleeding. The system was resuscitated, not repaired. Trillions appeared from nothing, and once again the illusion of stability returned. Markets rose. Confidence returned. The world exhaled too quickly. They called it recovery, but it was really a mutation. The disease had gone deeper into the DNA of the system. Debt became permanent. Interest rates stayed near zero. The line between capitalism and government blurred. Central banks became gods, conjuring prosperity from code. Ordinary people never truly recovered. Jobs came back, but wages stagnated. The rich saw their wealth multiply. The middle class faded. Inequality widened like a fault line under a city that refuses to stop dancing. The economy had been saved, but the balance was gone. And just like after 1929, humanity forgot. The panic faded, replaced by euphoria. Tech stocks, crypto, artificial intelligence, new temples for the same old faith. Each generation builds its own myth of invincibility. Each generation thinks the pattern ended with the last one, but the math never changes. When debt grows faster than production, when speculation outpaces reason, when belief becomes currency, collapse is only waiting for a spark. The 2008 crisis wasn't the end of history. It was the midpoint, the bridge between the analog delusion and the digital one. We didn't solve the pattern, we automated it. Every trade, every algorithm, every derivative now moves at the speed of light, amplifying both greed and fear beyond human control. The next crash won't start in a bank. It will start in the code itself. The politicians will promise once more that it's contained. The experts will appear on screens, explaining why it's temporary. And people will want to believe them, because the alternative is unthinkable. But the pattern doesn't care about comfort. It doesn't care about politics or pride. It simply repeats. 2008 was not a failure of the system. It was a system functioning exactly as designed, extracting value until nothing remains, then resetting under a new name. The faces changed, the screens glowed brighter, but the mechanism remained ancient. Human nature wrapped in technology, hope wrapped in leverage. The cycle paused, but it never ended. The clock kept ticking. And as the numbers grew larger, the debts, the deficits, the delusions, so did the cost of the next fall. History was not cured in 2008. It was rebooted. The empire of credit rose again, stronger, faster, more global. But this time, the empire had no borders. It was everywhere, in every nation, every market, every pocket. And when the next collapse comes, it will not be one country's tragedy. It will be the world's. The second collapse taught us nothing new. It simply reminded us what we already knew and chose to forget, because forgetting is easier than changing. And denial is the most profitable business in history. The numbers have started to bend again. The same euphoria, the same complacency, the same belief that technology makes us gods. But the pattern waits, patient and perfect. It always does. The signs are here again. The same warnings that echoed through 1929. The same tremors that shook 2008. Different technology, different generation. Same delusion. We have built an economy of illusions, a digital empire of code and confidence. Everything looks stable on the surface, but the deeper you look, the more fragile it becomes. The global system has never been more connected or more exposed. Every currency tied to every other, every market chain to every screen. It's no longer just Wall Street. It's everywhere. After the last collapse, the world promised never to repeat the same mistakes. They said the new financial system was safer, smarter, self-correcting. But the system isn't smarter. It's faster. And faster means the crash comes sooner. Debt has reached levels no civilization has ever survived. Governments borrow trillions not to build or invest, but to postpone the inevitable. The United States owes more than it produces. Europe is aging. Asia is slowing. And every solution is the same. Print more, spend more, promise more. Each cycle adds another layer to the illusion. They call it innovation. They call it modernization. But it's the same ancient story. The empire that cannot stop expanding even as it begins to rot from within. Rome called it debasement. Spain called it inflation. Britain called it devaluation. We call it monetary policy. Different names, same decay. In 2025, the pattern is global. It's in the banks, the markets, the currencies, the algorithms. The very foundations of the world economy are trembling, and the cracks are widening. Inflation is no longer a number on a report. It's the rising cost of everything you touch. Groceries, housing, energy, everything costs more, and the excuses sound familiar. Temporary, transitory, under control. They always say that right before the collapse. The truth is simple. Money has lost its anchor. It's no longer backed by anything real. Not gold, not productivity, not trust. It's backed by faith, and that faith is fading. The dollar once ruled the world like an unshakable empire, but now nations are walking away from it. China, Russia, the BRICS nations, all searching for an alternative, and they will find one, because history demands it. Every empire believes its currency will last forever. Every empire falls the moment that belief breaks. The end doesn't come as invasion. It comes as doubt, a quiet loss of faith that spreads faster than any army. And one morning, the world wakes up realizing the numbers no longer mean what they used to. We are standing in that moment now. Interest payments on debt exceed national defense budgets. Markets swing on emotion, not logic. Governments manipulate data to maintain illusions of growth. And the public, distracted, entertained, hypnotized, believe the story because it's easier than facing the truth. We're told everything is fine. But fine doesn't feel like this. Fine doesn't mean working 2 jobs to survive. Fine doesn't mean saving less, earning less, and paying more every year. Fine doesn't mean fear hidden behind optimism. The system isn't fine. It's dying. Slowly, quietly, predictably. The numbers are still rising, but they're hollow. The graphs still climb, but they're empty. And behind the illusion of progress, the foundation is turning to dust, just like it did before. When you look back at history, you realize something haunting. Collapse never feels like collapse while it's happening. It feels like stability, right up until the day it doesn't. The crash always looks impossible the day before it becomes inevitable. That's where we are now. And once again, the experts will say, this time it's different, but it never is. Because it's not the systems that repeat. It's us. Our emotions, our greed, our denial. We rewrite the rules, rename the variables, invent new technologies, and still find our way back to the same cliff. It's human nature written in economic form. The most dangerous thing about every bubble is not the price. It's a belief that someone will always step in to save it, that someone else will take the fall. But this time, there's no one left to bail out the world. Every country is leveraged. Every institution is stretched. Every promise has already been spent. When this one breaks, there is no outside. There is only down. The same cycle that destroyed the empires of the past is now consuming the global one. Slowly, invisibly, mathematically. It starts as economic tension, then social division, then political collapse, then silence. But history offers something else too, a chance, a window to see the pattern before it completes. The people who recognize it first are never the richest or the loudest. They're the ones who learn to read between the numbers, who hear the rhythm beneath the headlines. They see the repetition. And that awareness changes everything. Because the moment you understand the pattern, you stop being controlled by it. You stop chasing the illusion and start preparing for the reality. If you've made it here, you already feel it. The quiet unease when the news doesn't match the truth. The sense that something enormous is moving beneath the surface. You're not imagining it. You're seeing it. You're awake in a world that prefers to sleep. That's why this channel exists. Not to sell panic. Not to spread fear. but to reveal the code, the rhythm of history, repeating beneath the noise of modernity. To give you clarity when confusion becomes a norm. Because when the next crash arrives, and it will, the people who saw it coming won't be surprised. They'll be ready. If you want to stay awake while the world closes its eyes, stay here. Subscribe to the Economy Code, not for entertainment, for understanding. Because what's coming isn't random. It's a continuation of the same law that has governed every empire, every market, every rise, and every fall. 3 times this occurred. Same trend, and it's starting again. When the world begins to shake, when the headlines turn to panic, when the system you were told to trust starts to crack, remember what you heard here. The pattern never lies. It never changes. And this time, you're not watching it repeat. You're living in it. So listen closely. The sound you hear right now, the hum of markets, the calm before the storm, it's the same sound that echoed through history before every collapse. It's the heartbeat of an empire that doesn't know it's dying. History doesn't repeat itself. People do, and the pattern has already begun.